into looking at qualitative research and program evaluation. And when we look at qualitative research, we're basically talking about how to really dig way more deeply into the topic of interest that you have, much more so than quantitative research could ever really provide. So I provided you with a definition of it. There's several different definitions, and what I'm more interested is making sure that you understand that qualitative research basically brings this idea of looking very deeply at the whole picture, really looking at individual people, looking at things with a lot more detail, and really trying to keep it as natural as possible, versus, for example, in quantitative research, particularly in experimental designs, where you often find artificial interventions being given to one group or another. Qualitative research really wants to take people as they are in their natural environment. So you can see that some of the main characteristics of qualitative research are that it's given flexibility, given that it is trying to adapt to where people naturally live, work, and play, versus trying to get them into artificial settings in an organization or into a lab. It is not statistical, it's not quantitative, you're not trying to put numbers on things, rather you're trying to get at the depth, how complex, what people think and feel, and how they experience the world, and ultimately you're basically trying to tell the story. You're just trying to do it from a research perspective, which means you're doing it systematically so that other people that take the same process would expect to get to the same information. So then what are the steps of qualitative research? Well, as all research, you do start with a research question because you want to know why you're doing this. You want a question to guide you more or less, so that you don't end up just chasing a rabbit trail, and at the end of the study you want to go back to your research question and see if basically how well you've answered it. Then, rather than forming a hypothesis, really what you want to do then is first gather data. You don't have a hypothesis. You begin the process of collecting data. Again, this might be interviews, focus groups, you might be analyzing text. Then you'll understand what are some of the concepts or the ideas that people express. Then you'll start to bring those ideas together, and you'll start to analyze, for example, what's the maybe main barriers that people experience and trying to access healthcare, or what some of the main reasons are that women give in describing why they may not choose to leave an abusive partner. And then at the end, you build a theory. At the end, you start basically proposing the different variables that take place. At the end is when you can actually get to a point where you might be able to generate a hypothesis. So you see that qualitative research follows a very different process than some of the quantitative studies that we've looked at, especially in experimental design. So when we say it's inductive, keep in mind that qualitative research is inductive. What does that mean? Quantitative, when we look at the numbers and the statistical, that's deductive. Qualitative research is inductive. Remember what that means. Just like I described the process, when we talk about something being inductive, it means that you're gathering the data, and then at the end, you're trying to go from the data to basically guess at the theory, versus in quantitative research, you're trying to deduce. You're trying to take your hypothesis and find data to support it, versus getting the data first. And so it just kind of basically figures out how you're narrowing down or how you're expanding what you know. So again, this is a refresher, but just make sure that you understand the key differences here. For example, one has a very rigorous design. Qualitative is really more about the experience, the meaning. One is testing hypothesis. The other one is trying to figure out what are the concepts we should even be thinking about before we can generate a hypothesis. One is trying to predict an outcome. This is what I think is going to happen. Whereas qualitative is really focused on the process, how the questions are asked, how people experience the world. This one, the result is numbers, statistics. Whereas over here, you're going to get concepts and themes and stories and quotes.